through this section, and we continue to work on the traffic lights on Tonkin Highway through Walshpool and those areas. So as I said, this is all about making sure we continue to improve our infrastructure throughout the suburbs. As I said, it's about getting the trucks off the local roads through Byford. It's making sure that we can have better connections for freight traffic as well as for commuter traffic. A big project worth $1.045 billion. Can I thank all the team that's about to start commencing with some heavy construction. This is another project, as I said, that will very much transform how we commute through this southeast corridor. Will take the trucks and traffic out of the local roads, the Byford Town Centre, and it's something I know the local community is very, very keen on having. The other point I'd say too, which is also about this, also facilitating new commercial, industrial, and of course residential developments. These types of infrastructure very much helps spur on new housing and other commercial developments throughout the region. I now throw to Matt Keogh.
Well, thanks, Rita, and it's great to be here for what is a significant milestone on the journey of upgrading and extending Tonkin Highway, and also upgrading Thomas Road, combined over $1 billion project, and the Albanese government is contributing $749 million to these important road projects. Extending Tonkin Highway 14 kilometres with grade separated interchanges at Bishop Road and Orton Road, and importantly at Thomas Road, is significant, as well as the upgrade of 4.5 kilometres, duplicating 4.5 kilometres of Thomas Road with important intersection upgrades there as well, are all a great demonstration of the ongoing and strong partnership between the Albanese Labor government at a federal level and the Cook Labor government here in Western Australia. These two projects at over $1 billion will see 4,400 jobs created in construction. And I can tell you, as the local MP as well, working together with Hugh as the local state member of Parliament, that this has been a project sorely needed and long sought after, and it's great to get to this very important milestone today. The traffic that goes through Byford on the Southwest Highway and along Thomas Road now sees not just a significant number of trucks, but a huge number of cars coming out of these new and growing suburbs. There's some 60,000 vehicle movements here a day. And so it's really important to be able to get those trucks out of the town centre of Byford, not going down Thomas Road, because there's so many residences going up and down and through that area as well. And those intersections on Thomas Road, like at Carden and at Masters Malarkey Road, where it's just so difficult, I know. Talking to residents there, I've stood out on that road, I've spoken to many over the course of the election early this year, so frustrated by the time it takes just to pull in and out of those roads off Thomas Road. Of course, they're dangerous and they're hugely frustrating for local residents, and they're very much looking forward to seeing Tonkin Highway extended, to seeing Thomas Road upgraded, getting trucks out of their local roads, improving access to neighbourhood roads as well. It's going to make journeys faster, it's going to make them safer. And of course, when we look at the Tonkin Highway extension as part of that larger project of over $1.3 billion on extending but also upgrading Tonkin Highway, upgrading those intersections at Kelvin Road and Welshpool Road and Hale Road, removing those traffic lights, meaning that journeys throughout the whole southeast corridor will be faster and safer for commuters, for people, whether they're trying to get to school, trying to get to work, trying to get to further study, going to see family and friends. It's been huge congestion all through this area, and with the population growing so quickly, it's so important to be getting this project done now. And it's a great example of the partnership of the Albanese and Cook Labor governments being able to deliver for our growing outer suburban communities. Thanks.
Hugh, do you want to say anything?
No.
Hugh's very excited. Sorry, any questions?
What's the timeline for completion?
The completion is in 2028. It's a big project, as Matt explained, a number of key interchanges. So our target is by or in 2028.
There's been a lot of cost amendments with road construction projects in particular recently. Has that all smoothed out now? Are you confident this budget is enough to get it done?
Yeah, what we saw was, as we saw, a massive cost escalation. With this project, we also added in Thomas Road into the scope because we wanted to address the many safety concerns on Thomas Road. So we've incorporated that into this scope. Yeah, we're far more confident with our budgets because that escalation is starting to move out. People are far more certain, in particular, about cost of concrete, asphalt, and there's less risk in the projects. We've also negotiated with the contractors in relation to all the parts of this project that sometimes sees some cost increases, so we've negotiated that up front, so we're confident with the budget.
Can you expand, you mentioned before about residential housing and that kind of stuff in the area, can you expand on that a little bit, how it's so important and kind of the growth of this corridor as well?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of land subdivision happening in this corridor. Through Oakford, for example, there's been some new developments, and of course Byford proper, there's a lot of new housing developments. There's thousands of new homes that will be moved into this area. So on the two fronts, first of all, in relation to industrial movements, this is really going to make the movement of freight throughout this corridor a lot more efficient and far safer because we've got a dedicated highway that won't involve the Southwest Highway crawling through, in a sense, towns like Byford. In relation to housing developments, there's been a lot of anticipation of this project, a lot of work, subdivisions that have occurred, but in particular planning that's been undertaken, moving the zoning from rural to an urban zone to facilitate new housing, and through this entire area you'll see more and more housing estates. We've seen, in particular now with the investment that we've put in both the rail line and also this Tonkin Highway extension, we've seen a lot of more confidence in this sector, a lot of developers moving in and now getting ready to develop more housing. And particular when you look at affordability, this southeast corridor, its proximity to key job employment areas, and in particular what will be happening on the coast around Kwinana. Also, the ability to move around much more safely will really attract a lot of home buyers. The other point I would say, and as experiencing what's happened around Ellenbrook, when the Tonkin Highway extension through Ellenbrook basically took a lot of traffic on the residential roads, it made it a lot safer. And I know if you look at some of the stats in relation to road safety in this region, a lot of these roads are still very much rural roads, trying to cope with significant through traffic. Now, what we're having with the Tonkin Highway extension is taking a lot of that traffic away from those suburban streets.
Are you considering stripping Optus of the Perth Stadium naming rights?
That's not our focus at the moment. Our focus is really understanding what transpired. First of all, I want to publicly send my condolences to the two families involved in Western Australia. Had a briefing this morning in relation to what transpired. It's clear that Optus has very much failed the Western Australian public, have not put in the protocols that they were meant to put in relation to notification once these lines were not went down. And my focus currently is understanding exactly what transpired and sending my condolences to the families. And the police, of course, have been in touch with the families and are working with them.
Did the Premier end up speaking with the CEO yesterday?
I'm not going to make any comments about that. Like I said, our key focus currently is understanding exactly what transpired, how this situation occurred. In my briefing today from a number of key DGs, in particular the Police Commissioner, it's clear that there were protocols that were meant to be put in place by Optus that were not put in place in relation to notifications, and that's something we need to get to the bottom of. The police are currently have commenced their investigation into what happened, and we'll be doing that on behalf of the coroner. So our current focus is understanding exactly what happened and how we can avoid these things happening again.
Did the Premier end up speaking with the Optus CEO yesterday afternoon, and if so, how did that conversation go?
I'm not 100% sure if that. I know the Premier has spoken to the Optus CEO over the past 24 hours. I'm not exactly sure when, but in relation to this issue, as I said, as Acting Premier today, I've taken advice from all the relevant agencies to understand exactly what happened, and as I said, it's clear that Optus has failed the Western Australian public. I was shocked to find out exactly the extent of that failure. These things should not happen, and my sincere condolences go out to the two families involved.
Would you go into an Optus shop and sign up for anything if you were a member of the public?
Again, I'll leave that to the members of the public. As I said, this is a terrible failure beyond imagination of what happened. And when you dial that 000 number, it means that you need emergency support. It means that you're in an emergency situation. And I feel for those families involved.
Have police finished their welfare checks now? Or is there a confidence that the 2 deaths we know about are it?
There is a level of confidence in relation to the 149 checks. There are still 2 outstanding of the 100.
Of the 2?
No, of the 149, there are 2 outstanding, but they don't. Their current view is they're not concerned about that outstanding 2. So the police can provide more information this afternoon if required, but they've, as I've been notified, 149 welfare checks, and there are still 2, but they don't seem to have a degree of concern about that outstanding 2.
Have government or police had the opportunity to make contact with the families at all, provide some answers to them?
Yes, the police have gone and have contacted the families and are working with those families through their welfare operations. As I said, this is a clear failure from Optus. There's no, I don't think, it's clear that Optus did not act as they should have in relation to notifications. And this is something that, again, the feedback I got today was as a result of what happened in 2023 with those outages. There was an inquiry and it made clear recommendations on what needs to happen when there is an outage, and those protocols were not followed. And that is something that, again, I understand Optus will be speaking today, that further work will be done by our police in relation to the investigation of those 2 deaths, but it is clear that Optus failed its duties.
The 2 deaths will be...
CEO should remain in his job.
Do you have any insight as to what those families like that, how those conversations have gone or anything?
No, I don't, sorry.
Do you think the Optus CEO should remain in his job?
Again, look, I'm not going to provide commentary on this. I think there needs to... I'm not going to provide commentary on this. As I said, my focus today is really to understand exactly what transpired, where the failures were, making sure police can get on with their investigation and doing what we can from a state to make sure these types of things never happen. Now, in relation to what happened, though, it's clear that, as I said, there was clear protocols that were not followed by Optus.
Exactly
That being
what
said,
time...
does that make you reflect on the state's own health concerns? Like, for example, we know ramping is an issue. Does this crisis give you a bit more pause for thought or make you review that at all?
Oh, I think what it does and needs to happen is that when reviews of systems failures are undertaken, and there was a review undertaken since 2023, then that needs to be acted on, and it's clear that Optus did not act on those failures from 2023.
Is it becoming harder to manage healthcare, or do you look at them as kind of 2 separate issues?
2 separate issues.
The 2 deaths will be referred to the coroner. Would you expect a public inquest?
As I understand, the police are currently starting their investigation on behalf of the coroner, so the police have already started their investigation into these 2 deaths. So I'm not exactly sure of the nature of the inquest, with the coroner, but the police have already started their investigation on this matter.
Given the high level of public interest, though, would you expect there to be some sort of public investigation?
I think that may also happen under the federal government because they're responsible for communications. And as I said, though, there were similar inquiries that were undertaken a few years back, and it's clear the protocols that were recommended were not put in place.
Given the protocols recommended back then weren't properly
Followed.
Is there also some responsibility on the federal government for... I mean, telecommunications is a necessity, not just a product. Is it being properly regulated to ensure that those protocols were properly being managed?
Well, I think the protocols were there, but they just weren't implemented at a time when they should have, and that happened last week. So
there are ways to check whether things have been implemented, where there are checks and balances in place.
Yeah, look, I don't want to go through the commentary on that. All I know is that there were protocols in place and they weren't followed. over Wednesday and Thursday of last week.
Exactly what time was the state government or WA police notified on Friday?
Okay, so I'll just go through with a bit of detail, and it was on Thursday evening at 9:04 p.m. Police were notified by Optus requesting a welfare check on 26 residents of WA. Those welfare checks were completed. Then the following day is when the state government more broadly learnt of the 149 missed calls, and they happened when there was a media release and media commentary. So the state government was not notified of those 149 missed calls until it was made public.
So at the time of the CEO's press conference,
Yes.
that was the first notification of the broader scale of it?
Yes.
How disappointing is that from your perspective?
Well, as I said, there's that, but more specifically, the fact that the emergency services were not notified when the outage commenced is the most significant issue, is the fact that there were protocols that should an outage occur, then the state emergency services need to be notified, and that did not happen. And that is the key part here. So an outage occurred and no one knew about it, and that meant people were not prepared in case of emergency. So that failure in that notification, once the outage commenced, is what I think is the most distressing part of it all. If there were some notifications, if it was broadcast, then there might have been some other action that could have been taken to mitigate some of those circumstances.
I know you say you don't want to provide a running commentary, but again, given what you've just said, like someone's got to pay, someone's head's got to roll, isn't it?
Well, again, I'll leave that for the Optus CEO. I do acknowledge that in the previous outage, the Optus CEO resigned after that.
Just on the stadium naming rights, and I know you say that's not your focus at the moment, but radio commentators today have already said they potentially feel uncomfortable using the name Optus Stadium covering the Waffle Grand Final today. There is an argument about reputational damage, isn't there?
Yeah, I haven't heard that commentary so far today. Look, this is something, as I said, it's not a focus currently. As I said, it's really getting across all the time frames of events, understanding the hurt and the devastation the two families are experiencing. That's our focus at the moment, is, as I said, understanding exactly what transpired, also sending our condolences, and really feeling for those families. That's where our head's at the moment.
Zemplus has said the name should be pulled down.
Look, as I said, I don't want to be playing politics about this naming situation. Our focus today is really understanding what happened, how it transpired, and how we're assisting the two families involved.
Just a question on the proposed ferry terminal at Matilda Bay. There's a group of sailors with disabilities who run a program out of that proposed location. Have you consulted with this group at all about this new ferry terminal, and what have they said?
Yeah, absolutely. Sailability, they run out of two locations, South Perth and Matilda Bay. My office is in constant contact, and we'll be arranging a meeting very soon. They've been involved in many of the discussions. We'll continue to work with them to make sure we can mitigate any risks for those sailors.
So they'll still be able to operate out of that location?
Our understanding is yes, but we'll work with them to make sure they can continue to operate.
Will you meet with them personally?
Sailability, I'm happy to meet with them.
When you say work with them, you'll work with them to find something else that might suit them, but the ferry terminal goes ahead.
Well, the ferry terminal, through a multi-criteria analysis where we looked at all different aspects, including water safety, a number of other measures, there was an independent analysis done which showed that that location posed the lowest risk in relation to water users. So you have to take the advice that, in particular on these issues, that is provided to you. As I said, a multi-criteria analysis which went through 5 locations and determined in relation to, for example, to waterways risk and also impact on other users, that this would be the best site. In relation to sailability, as I said, our office is in constant contact. Happy to meet with them if they want, if they desire, but also making sure that we can work with them. A very big I understand their program is very popular and we're very keen to work with them.
How has your analysis found something different to their analysis that found JoJo's was a better location?
Well, I'm not sure if they did a full multi-criteria analysis of 5 different sites. as I outlined in the Parliament last Thursday, in relation to JoJo's, there is very significant increase in water safety risk because it crosses a key navigational channel. It also has far greater environmental risks, in particular onshore. It will touch bush forever site. There's also a lot of seagrass and other maritime flora and fauna issues as well. So we went through a very extensive multi-criteria analysis that was presented to the users. We also then undertook a further meeting with the users to just focus on safety. As I said, these decisions are always difficult, and not any decision, not any position will have 100% support. But given all the evidence in front of me, all the advice, all the analysis, this is the best option.
Can I ask you about a woman who was attacked a couple of days ago in Coles, Armidale? It was quite a serious attack. She's called for security in those locations to be given tougher powers. Do you accept that this is something police should look at, or the legislators should look at?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, after some issues were raised with us, I think at the beginning of last year, in relation to shopping centre safety, there was an increased presence of police in many shopping centres, so we saw an increased presence to act as a deterrent. We've also got the legislation to be brought in soon, which is about banning repeat offenders from our shopping centres, and in particular those that have impacted or caused damage or have also impacted individuals in those shopping centres. So we're moving on those issues. In relation to the powers of security guards, that's something that's always, I think, raised in relation to these shopping centres. We'll continue to have an increased police presence and also having these banning notices initially, but we continue to look at all options.
I mean, to give them just perhaps a little extra powers to exclude people, and even if it comes down to it, manhandle them out of a shopping centre if they need to, without facing fear of prosecution.
Yeah, no, look, again, it's something that has, been raised a number of times. As I said, our banning notices are really the first step in making sure that we can refuse entry to repeat offenders and make sure those that are known to police are not allowed back in those shopping centres.
Can I just ask Matt about Optus? Obviously Optus rightly wears the large proportion of blame, but given this isn't the first time this has happened, given there was a $12 million penalty, there were protocols meant to be in place, does the federal government share any responsibility for not ensuring those protocols were being acted on?
So the first thing I'd say is, huge sympathy goes out to the families that have been impacted by the Optus outage for 000 calls at the end of last week. No family should experience what they've gone through, where they, in their time of emergency, when they needed to rely on the emergency telephone number 000, their call went unanswered. This has happened before. There was a review that was conducted with the Australian government. There were some 18 recommendations. They were all agreed to. Optus was to implement those recommendations, and in this instance it has not followed the protocol that it was required to put in place as a result of that inquiry that was conducted by ACMA. ACMA will be conducting a further inquiry. Our role is to obviously regulate telecommunications providers to set those rules, especially when it comes to emergency calling and the universal service obligation on our telecommunications companies. Optus has clearly failed, and they'll be held accountable to that.
But was there enough checking by the regulators? I mean, given telecommunications is an essential...
Yeah, and we regulate the telecommunications industry. We set the rules. The rules were set. Optus didn't follow them. They'll be held accountable to that.
But isn't there checking of whether the rules are followed?
We don't run the telco.
Auditing? No.
I want to be very clear about this. Optus is responsible for its failure.
But ACMA can audit and has there been any checks that all the recommendations
And Optus
were...
didn't follow its own rules here.
Yeah.
What about
Optus is responsible.
What about Singtel? Singtel is the Singapore national telecom company that owns Optus. Should they be held accountable as well?
So there will be an ACMA inquiry that goes into all of the details of exactly what happened and how it was that Optus didn't follow the rules that were put in place after the previous occurrence, and that will be worked through as to what the consequences of that are following that inquiry. And that's important. I think, as the Deputy Premier said, the important thing right in the immediate step is to make sure that the families that have been impacted are supported, that those that also had their calls missed are followed up, and that's been done by WA Police here and by police in South Australia as well. And then we get into the full inquiry as to what has caused and resulted in Optus not following its own procedure that was put in place after the review in 2023, and Optus needs to answer for that.
Do you know what the nature of that support is that's been given to those companies?
With the state government operating it.
If the $12 million penalty wasn't enough last time around to stop it happening again, is a bigger penalty needed this time?
Well, we'll need to see what comes out of the inquiry and what the processes are for implementation of penalties. Penalties are imposed externally the government doesn't just set a penalty, but we'll need to go through that full inquiry process.
Do you have a view as to the CEO, whether he should go?
Well, I'm not going to make a comment about what happens to the CEO. That's a matter for the board of Optus to determine. I think, once bitten, twice shy. This has happened again. What customers decide to do will probably also have an impact on how the board decides to review this.
Would you
Last
understand
questions.
if the public were decided to boycott Optus?
Well, certainly I'd be very much understanding if customers are deciding to vote with their feet, having seen what's occurred.